We all know the big names on the trade market for the Mariners, whether that be Luis Robert or Vladdy or Bo Bichette, etc. But no one's talking about these 6 players as possible trade targets for the Seattle Mariners. Maybe because these teams aren't quite out of it yet. But guys, I do expect to be available when the deadline comes around here at the beginning of August. And in this video, we're going to break down these 6 guys. We're going to start here with one pitcher, which is Pete Fairbanks from the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays find themselves in a weird spot because we know how good the Rays team is, and they're not that far behind in the wild card. But as of right now, they sit like 10.5 games back in the American League East, simply because the Orioles and the Yankees are both that good. They're on the outside looking in the wild card, so maybe at some point they do want to unload some of their guys, and obviously the big ones are Randy Arozarena and maybe even Isaac Paredes. So those guys are ones that I feel like have been talked about quite a bit, but Fairbanks is a guy that I think makes a lot of sense for the Mariners. On the year, in just 19 innings pitched, Fairbanks has a 3.32 ERA. He struck out 22 while also walking 10, which kind of leads to his higher whip here at 1.316. He has a 2.40 FIP on the year with a 1.17 ERA+. He strikes out quite a few guys at 33.2%, but also walks quite a bit at 10.3%, which is about 2% higher than the MLB average. Looking at his Savant page here, you can see that he doesn't give up a whole lot of barrels, and he also doesn't give up a whole lot of hard exit velocity, 87 miles an hour in the 86th percentile. Pete Fairbanks is a guy that I think in that bullpen, he doesn't have to be a closer or anything for you. He just makes sense as like a setup guy for the Mariners, so you don't have to always rely on Stanek or even Mike Baumann at this point. He's just somebody that I think would make sense to add to this team. The Mariners would have Fairbanks through the rest of this season, of course, and then in 2025 at $3.6 million, there's a club option for him at $7 million in 2026. All in all, a pretty team-friendly deal in my opinion. Now, before we go any further, I want to make one thing very clear. These may seem like bargain bin guys that the Mariners would target as like their big offseason or trade acquisitions in the middle of the season. I want to stress that these are just supplementary guys. The Mariners should still be fishing in the big part of the pond with Vladdy, Robert, etc. They need to be up there and in the talks for those guys. These are just other players the Mariners could add, as well as adding some of those guys to make this team even better. Again, I think they should be adding some of the highest tier guys. These are just guys that they should add on the back end to kind of round out this team. Now let's talk about another guy that's always been pretty popular with Mariners fans, and that is Mark Canha. Now, he's 35 years old, but he can play first base in the outfield for you. This might be even more pressing with, of course, the injury to Ty France. At the time of recording this, we don't necessarily know what's going on other than the fact that he hurt his foot on a hit by pitch and that Tyler Locklear is coming up. Canha's been a really solid producer throughout his entire MLB career. On the year, he's hitting 236, 343, 377 with a 106 OPS plus. He has 6 homers with 25 RBI. He's a career 249, 349, 420 hitter with a 114 OPS plus. And he's hit 119 homers in his career. He's not a huge power guy, but he can usually hit you 10, 15, maybe even 20 home runs any given year. He strikes out at a 21.5% clip this year and walks at 11.6% so far this year. Both are better than the MLB average. His Savant pages kind of always look like this, but as you can see, he doesn't chase much and he walks quite a bit. He doesn't necessarily hit the ball hard, and again, this is kind of what his Savant pages always look like. Even in 2023, a lot of blue on there, but he's still a very productive player. Canha's making $11.5 million this year with the Detroit Tigers, and we know the Tigers are probably going to be out of it, especially with how good the Central has been so far this year. So the Mariners would probably take on $5-ish million of that contract if they were to acquire him. When it comes to packages, I don't really know what to throw out for these teams because a lot of them should be teams that are rebuilding, but who knows where like a team like the Mets, for example, see themselves moving forward, or the Angels. So I don't want to throw out packages. These are just guys that I think make sense for the Mariners, but it shouldn't cost you more for most of these guys than maybe 1 or 2 of your top 30 prospects. I'd say in the 10 to 20 range at most for these guys. So just kind of bear that in mind. You're not going to use the top end of your top prospect rankings for these guys. Those are going to be, again, save for Vladdy or Luis Robert. And speaking of the Angels, another very popular one with the Mariners for quite a long time is outfielder Taylor Ward for the Angels. He's 30 years old, outfielder and apparently third baseman, although I don't know if I can remember a time where he played third base. On the year, Ward's hitting 254, 324, 444, the 116 OPS plus. Again, he's another guy that's been a solid contributor throughout his major league career for the last 4 or 5 years. His career numbers are around average. In 2024, however, he has a 22.9% strikeout percentage, which is right there at league average, and a 9.9% walk percentage, which is about a percentage and a half higher than the league average. Ward's savant page has always looked really good. He is in the 91st percentile in barrel percentage. His expected slugging is in the 94th percentile. His hard hit percentage is in the 70th percentile. His launch angle sweet spot, 96th percentile. A lot of red on his page. That's really all we need to care about, right? A lot of red on his page for Taylor Ward. Ward's in the second year of his arbitration. He was a Super 2 guy, so he does have 2 more years after this year. He's making $4.8 million in 2024, probably like $2 million if he was to come over to the Mariners. And then again, arbitration 3 and 4 in 25 and in 26. Obviously, when it comes to a guy like Taylor Ward, it's probably not going to happen because it's the Angels, and we know that the Angels don't want to make trades with Jerry Dipoto, but nonetheless, that is a trade possibility for the Mariners. Now I want to move on to 3 players with the Mets, the first of which is a guy who I've talked about a lot for the Mariners in the past, which is Harrison Bader. He's a center fielder, but obviously he played a corner for the Mariners. So far on the year, he's hitting 272, 317, 376 with a 104 OPS plus. He has 3 homers with 23 RBI. He's striking out at a 21.2% clip, so a little above league average there, and he has a 5.3% walk rate, which is quite a bit below league average. His savant page, really, it's only his launch angle sweet spot that does anything for you here, but he is a great defender in the outfield. Again, this is not a guy that I think the Mariners should go out there and add as like the big piece to finish off their roster, but just as more of a supplementary piece to maybe, I don't know, be a platoon guy in the outfield, maybe a little bit better than some of the guys we have right now. Bader's making $10.5 million in 2024 and then becomes a free agent, so we'll call it about $5 and maybe $4.5 million if the Mariners were to acquire him. Next up is another outfielder from the New York Mets, this one being Starling Marte. He's 35 years old, going on 36, so he's kind of at the tail end of his career. But the Marte Parte continues on. He's hitting 276, 326, 414 with a 117 OPS plus. Another really solid contributor throughout his career. He has a 115 career OPS plus. Marte's striking out at a 21.5% rate. That's about league average. And he's walking at a 6.1% rate, which is quite a bit below league average. But you look at his savant page and you can see why Marte is a guy that I think it would be really attractive for the Mariners to go out and get. 94th percentile in expected batting averages, average exit velocity in the 74th percentile, launch angle sweet spot in the 84th percentile as well. A lot of red on this page for Starling Marte, again at the tail end of his career. Also, one thing I find important is that he uses the whole field, as you guys can see here. A lot of his home runs are pulled, his power is to the pull side, however he does spray the ball around the field. Marte is in the second to last year of his contract at almost $21 million in this year and next year, so ideally the Mets would have to pay some of that down, or the Mariners would really not have to give up too much to go get Starling Marte in terms of prospects. Overall though, this number just really has to come down if Marte was to become a Mariner, because nobody's paying $21 million for Starling Marte in 2024. And that brings us to designated hitter J.D. Martinez, another very popular one with Mariners fans for the last couple of years. Even at the age of 36, Martinez still continues to be the guy he always has been. He's hitting 281, 331, 467 with a 133 OPS plus. He has 5 homers with 15 RBI. I don't really think about it much, but I do think that JD Martinez is probably going to be a Hall of Famer. He has 320 home runs in his career, a career 287, 349, 523 hitter with a 133 career OPS plus. The thing with Martinez is he is striking out quite a bit more this year than he has in his career. At 29, we'll just call it 30%, whereas for his career, he's been at 25%. He's also walking less than normal at a 6.9, nice, percentage so far this year, compared to an 8.6 career percentage. So maybe the bat's slowing down a little bit for JD Martinez, but he's still a productive player. His savant page has always been really red, and his barrel percentage is a big reason why here. He hits the ball on the barrel all the time in the 97th percentile, average exit velocity in the 83rd percentile, so he's still hitting the ball quite hard, but his bat speed is here in the 57th percentile, and as you guys can see, he does strike out quite a bit. Now, interestingly enough, Martinez signed a $12 million deal with the New York Mets. However, 7.5 of it was deferred from 2034 to 2038. So the deferrals are, I guess, a big part of that. Maybe the money stays with the Mets. I don't know. I don't care. He's making $4.5 million this year. So by the time the Mariners got him for this year's payroll, it'd be around like 2. A team like the Mets is probably going to want to sell off all of those guys because they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And they really do just need to kind of break it all down and sell off their team. But who knows if they're going to do that. We're still running a pretty high payroll there with the New York Mets. I think that overall, again, these guys are just guys that you add to the end of your trade deadline to really get the ball rolling for the rest of the season. You say, okay, let's tie a nice little bow on this team by adding JD Martinez, with Mitch Garver probably going to be the backup catcher from now on, and the DH spot may be a little bit more open. Maybe JD Martinez makes sense. However, with that being said, with Mitch Haniger still on the team and Mitch Garver still on the team, it's kind of hard to find spots for all these guys who probably should all be primary DHs. But the rest of them, they're pretty much all outfielders. Maybe they help push Mitch Haniger into the DH role when Mitch Garver is catching. And maybe then you have like Taylor Ward out there in right field, which again is probably not going to happen. But nonetheless, I think these guys do make a lot of sense for the Mariners. But they are not the big fish that the Mariners need to be going out there and trying to catch. We talked about those guys in this video on the screen now. I appreciate you guys watching this one, and go Mariners.